Motion to approve the agenda. Councillor Humphreys, seconded by Councillor Gallo. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. We have one item. Drinking water quality management standard of care. And we're having a presentation, is that correct? Oh, Mr. Downey, you're going to take care of this now? I'll hand it over to you. Your capable hands.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. 5 minutes?
Yeah. So I'd like to introduce our presenter this evening. Your name's Bridget Roth. You're going to be going through some provincially mandated training this evening, taking care of your drinking water. Bridget is a consultant that's hired by municipalities. She's already made presentations to Newmarket, Vaughan, and Markham. This is required training, as I said. At the end of this training, there will be an opportunity to ask questions. It should be about an hour and a half, the presentation. Then you'll be given an opportunity to ask any questions. They can ask questions during the presentation too. That'd be okay. Thank you, Bridget. And at the end of this evening as well, we do have a document we'd like you to sign and date that you have had this training and you are endorsing our operational plan. This training is for the owners of the water system, and as I stated to you, teach each member at some point, you are the owners of our drinking water system. You need to understand what goes on with our drinking water system, and decisions that you make related to our drinking water system will ultimately be your responsibility. Okay, so with that, Bridget?
So, Bridget, just before you start, you did say that you don't mind if we ask questions throughout the presentation?
That is correct. I don't
mind
at all.
Council, if you do have a question and it pops up, just so we can kind of keep some order, just hit your button and then I'll make sure that I keep my eye on the screen, and if I see it, I'll interrupt and have you ask your question, okay? Councillor Thompson.
Might be better time-wise if we just hold our questions to the end.
I would prefer that
people may choose to ask questions that will be answered later in the presentation, yes. So perhaps we could consider doing that.
I appreciate that, and I would prefer that, but if someone does have a question, I will not stop them from asking it. So, Bridget?
I apologize, Mr. Ram. One other thing, this meeting is being streamed, so that if there's information that you want to refresh or look back at, that is available to you through streaming, and we will make it available to the members of council. The only one member of council who isn't here this evening will make it available to them, because as I said, this is mandatory training. We want to make sure that they understand all aspects of our drinking water system. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for inviting me to make this presentation to you as decision makers and the owner of your drinking water system for the town of Aurora. I want to point you to your folders that are in front of you, prepared by Justina, who works in the water department. She's prepared a copy of all of the presentation slides, and as well, there is a list of 20 questions. So there's a 2-page document that is stapled, and it lists 20 questions that the province has prepared. And the reason actually for the title of the presentation is the province has prepared a guide for members of municipal councils, and it is called Taking Care of Your Drinking Water. And within this provincial guide for members of municipal councils, it includes 20 questions that you should be able to answer eventually about your own drinking water system. And the point of this presentation is to help answer the 20 questions related to the drinking water system that you do oversee. And periodically on the slides, you will see a scroll with a number on it or a couple of numbers on it, and it corresponds to the questions and answers in this handout as well. Another handout is a distribution system map of the town of Aurora's drinking water system, and at the point in the presentation where it is relevant, we'll pull out the map so you can understand the different pressure zones, and then there's also a handout describing the distribution system and where the sources of water come from, and so you have some of your water sources feeding water to certain zones from the City of Toronto, and some of the water coming from Peel region feeding different zones of your distribution system. And then because the province is a little delayed in issuing the latest version of the Taking Care of Your Drinking Water Guide, you have a printout from the latest version that is available online, and that's part of your folder handouts as well. This is available online, and so when a future version is available, you can search the words "taking care of your drinking water" and it will come up as one of the results. Periodically, I will point out to various sections of this guide, and I'll name some page numbers specifically, and the slides do summarize all of the content as well. Why are we here? We are here because we have a statutory standard of care as members and any decision makers actually overseeing any drinking water system. There's this statutory standard of care. It falls under Section 19 of the Safe Drinking Water Act, and it requires yourselves as council, as the owner of the system, to understand your personal duty, to be informed, ask questions, and get answers regarding any decisions that you're being faced with answering, and being vigilant. One of the common themes in major disasters and catastrophes is complacency. And so in our roles in overseeing such a public health related issue such as safe drinking water, it's important for us to remain vigilant. And so on page 2 of your Taking Care guide, there is a summary of the 3 things to remember as a municipal councillor, and halfway through the page on page 2, it summarizes the 3 key points. It's your duty, you need to be informed, and to be vigilant in your role. And also, the point of this presentation is to provide an overview of the drinking water system that you do oversee, and a lot of the slides summarize those points that are high-level points related to your drinking water system. And then the remaining point of this presentation is to answer the questions on pages 10 and 11 of your guide, which is about being familiar with the drinking water system. So starting with question 1 on page 11, have I had a tour? There is a tour that can be arranged of the water treatment facilities that York Region oversees. It can be arranged through your water utility staff. And has in the past, and if there's enough interest, you can attend a water treatment facility. Section 19 of the Statutory Standard of Care, Section 19 of the Safe Drinking Water Act, Statutory Standard of Care, requires that we exercise a level of care, diligence, and skill that a reasonably prudent person would be expected to exercise in a similar situation, and act honestly, competently, and with integrity, ensuring the protection and safety of users of the municipal drinking water system, or be guilty of an offense. And so it's important that you understand the implications of your decisions. On page 7 of your handouts includes full wording of Section 19 of the Safe Drinking Water Act, which basically reiterates the main points there. About halfway down the page on page 7 is a full wording of Section 19 of the Act. And then also page 9 of the handout, the 3rd paragraph from the top, it's important to note the difference between the provisions in the Municipal Act that protect your personal liability as members of council. They don't apply here. So Section 19 of the Safe Drinking Water Act is exempt from those personal protections under the Municipal Act. And so you could be penalized, and a prosecution commenced if court has determined that you haven't fulfilled your due diligence role in this statutory standard of care. There is a shared responsibility for the provision of safe drinking water in Ontario. In the province, we have 2 ministries that oversee the safety of drinking water, and that's the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, and also the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care. We also have a shared responsibility with the local public health unit, being York Region Public Health, and then the drinking water system owner are yourselves as council, and then we have an accredited operating authority, which is Aurora's operations services. And when things do go wrong with the drinking water system, we have immediate verbal reports reports being made to the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, and also immediate verbal reports being made to Public Health, with written corrective actions summaries that ensue within a number of days. And then for health-related issues related to the drinking water system, you'd also receive notification. The Safe Drinking Water Act, sections 11 to 18, summarize owner responsibilities versus operating authority responsibilities. So the owner being council and members of municipal council, and then the operating authority is Aurora's operations services. The owner has to ensure that an accredited operating authority is operating the drinking water system. There's an accreditation program that is required for all municipal drinking water systems in Ontario, and it needs to be maintained in order to keep your license to operate. There's a municipal drinking water licensing program that the province leads, and in order to maintain that license, you have to maintain accreditation. And the owner has to ensure that the operating authority maintains that accreditation. You have to report to the public on any matter required by regulations, and so that is in your emergency management roles, you may have to report to the public, and then also on behalf of the operating authority, you post annual reports online, making those reports as required by regulation available to the public. If you had a separate operating authority, you would maintain an accreditation or an agreement with the accredited operating authority, and then within that agreement, you would have to describe the drinking water system description, owner versus operating authority roles and responsibilities regarding the compliance with Act, approvals, emergencies, operational plans, and you can delegate responsibilities to the operating authority in the agreement, except for your statutory standard of care duties of Section 19. You are allowed to rely on experts in good faith. So sometimes, from time to time, you may have studies or reports by engineers and other experts contributing some information that you may need to make your decisions. You are allowed to base your decisions on the experts that provide that information to you, and that is permitted under the Safe Drinking Water Act. The operating authority is responsible to provide water that meets the drinking water quality standards, ensure that labs that are used to test drinking water are accredited, and that their accreditation listing includes the tests for which we require to be carried out. We need to, as operating authorities, operate in accordance with the Safe Drinking Water Act, maintain the drinking water system in a good fit state of repair, satisfy the requirements for the drinking water system class that you have, ensure that the drinking water system is operated and by certified and trained persons as required, supervised by qualified persons per regulations and approvals, that you carry out sampling, testing, and monitoring requirements and comply with them, and report as required. So again, you would see annual and summary reports from your staff of the operating authority summarizing details of parameters and compliance data that have to be monitored continuously and tested for on a regular basis. This next slide depicts the operating authority organizational structure, and it also identifies who is owner. So members of council as a whole is the owner of the drinking water system, and then we have members of top management who includes the CAO and your director of operations, and then within that group we have your implementation lead for the drinking water quality management standard, and you have a representative and a number of staff that fall under this group. In your quality management system policy, you are committed to 3 key things. You are committed to ensuring a consistent supply of safe, high-quality drinking water through commitment of system maintenance, and you are committed to maintaining and continually improving your quality management system through the commitment to Aurora's consumers to provide safe drinking water, and you are committed to comply with applicable regulations and legislation. This slide answers a couple of questions from the Taking Care of Your Drinking Water Guide, so O2C, and question number 8 about top management competency and years experience. So do we have the right people involved in operations, water operations? And we do have all of the minimum competencies required except for the person who's in an acting role, but you do have the designations and competency requirements met, and a variety of years experience as well. One of the major outcomes from the Walkerton tragedy is the multi-barrier approach. So with the Walkerton tragedy, we had a number of these barriers fail at the same time. Essentially a perfect storm of things that had occurred. And so starting with source water, the water source in Walkerton was not, it was known to be vulnerable for decades prior to the event. And then you had a high rain event that contributed to an overwhelming system or overwhelming condition. The treatment system was not operating as intended, and in fact offline. And the monitoring programs that we had were not being carried out as required. We even had certified operators that were falsifying records and failing to report unsafe conditions for drinking water. And in fact, on 3 different occasions, the local public health unit had, medical officer of health had approached the manager to ask, is the water safe? And on 3 occasions, they said yes, when it actually wasn't. And so we came, the province came out with a multi-barrier approach, starting with source water protection. And though the Ontario Water Resources Act existed pre-Walkerton tragedy, the Clean Water Act is what came out post-Walkerton. And so Ontario Water Resources Act regulates water takings, so it regulates wastewater discharges to surface waters, and permits, it issues permits to take water. And so there are evaluations, geotechnical evaluations on are these water takings, the new water takings going to impact aquifers or surface water conditions. And then the Clean Water Act came out and has set around the province, not necessarily northwestern Ontario, but throughout all of the province, there's a watershed-based source protection committee, source protection area established for all the watersheds in eastern Ontario and all the way down southwestern Ontario, southern Ontario. And with the source protection areas, it's looking at the entire watershed and how impacts, multi-jurisdictional impacts on the watershed can impact someone else's source water. And so the intent is to protect the surface water or water in general to ensure that other communities would have good, safe, clean water. So from source protection areas that are watershed based, they have source protection committees which have multiple jurisdictions and representatives from each of the jurisdictions, and looking at all of the vulnerable areas throughout that source protection area. And not only that, but identifying vulnerable areas, but also identifying drinking water threats that are located within those vulnerable areas. And so there's all sorts of programming around making sure that the water that we use for drinking water systems remain safe and of good quality. And that's where the Clean Water Act has made an influence. And then the Safe Drinking Water Act regulates all of the subsequent barriers. So it regulates water treatment, all the inspection and monitoring and testing, and ensures a secure distribution system all the way to the consumer's tap. And so we have hopefully optimal barriers along the way that are operating as intended. So you have safe, secure sources that feed into an optimized drinking water treatment system that is running as intended, that you're carrying out all the testing activities and monitoring activities as you should to ensure that you know definitively that the water is safe all the way to the tap. And so one of the handouts from your package is this slide, pretty much. You do have a question being answered about, am I familiar with the municipal drinking water source? And so you do have two sources of water feeding into your distribution system. So you have Peel Region treating and providing water through zones 1, 2, and 4, which are depicted in your distribution system map. So they're color-coded to match. And then you also have a City of Toronto water being fed to zones 5, 3B, 3A, and I guess also to zone 2-6, if that is correct. Yeah, so it's a blended system there. And so we have surface water that is being treated and by the two other municipalities, and you have secure water through trunk mains that feed into your local distribution network here. And as described about the Clean Water Act, this slide depicts the source protection area for Aurora, and actually the most vulnerable areas within your municipal boundaries. And so the darkest colors with the darkest dots are your most vulnerable areas around well sites. And then, so York Region also oversees some wells, local wells. And so you have, and as you go further away from the wells, you have less vulnerability, and the further you move away from the source protection zone. So with the darkest colors, you have wellhead protection areas A, which are 100 meters from the wellhead, and then lighter brown shaded areas as wellhead protection area B, and pink shaded areas are wellhead protection area C, and so on. And so it's most vulnerable at the center points, wellhead protection areas. And part of the Clean Water Act was to, again, define what are those source protection areas that are most vulnerable, and what are some water quality and quantity issues, what are some threatening activities, and you have a risk assessment process involved. And then locally, you also have source protection policies that address your most significant risks in protecting water supply. And also managed through York Region, you have a number of activities. So you had within Aurora boundaries, you had 211 total threat sites identified, located within these vulnerable areas. And then you have 77 development sites reviewed, and you have a number of risk management plans, 30 of them that have been completed, and 16 that are ongoing. This figure and summary page come from the York Region Source Water Protection Implementation Plan from 2017. One of the barriers is effective treatment. You have 80% surface water through York Region from Peel and Toronto, and then 20% well water from York Region with 6 local wells. You have continuous monitoring of water quality through Aurora's system as well as York Region, and you have well water treatment and chlorination is carried out by York Region. Some distribution system goals is that we have an effective design and build so that you meet maximum daily use for residential and industrial, commercial, institutional customers. You also have a reserve capacity for firefighting. So you always want to maintain within your distribution system a minimum amount of water for fire flows. So you're not only meeting supply or demand, the amount of supply for demand, you're also meeting your fire flows. And then you also want to ensure that you have redundancy so that you have your high summer peaks being met still even at those points in the year. And so you want to have some redundancy so that you're not just meeting demand. System operation, your distribution system pays attention to pressures, system pressures. So if you have optimized system pressures, you shouldn't see any vulnerabilities to backflow events or introduction of contaminants within the distribution system. So you're looking at effective pressure management. You're also ensuring that you have disinfectant residual maintained at the furthest reaches of your distribution system. And so there is chlorine residual monitoring that is very important to make sure that we meet those optimal levels throughout the distribution system. And where there may be problematic areas for chlorine residual or low flow conditions, you may carry out some flushing and cleaning activities, which then the water department would communicate with the residents impacted about, oh, we're flushing in this area, you might see some discolored water, or and if you do, these are the actions you take. There's also making sure that you're not buying water from York Region only to lose it in the distribution system. So leak detection and conditions of your distribution system are important to make sure that you maintain good quality water from from the suppliers to the system consumers. And then when you have water main breaks, you have timely responses to system breakdowns, and then also preventive maintenance to ensure that you have longevity in your assets and providing that reliability of service. You have, through the Drinking Water Quality Management Standard and through actually asset management planning regulations, you have infrastructure planning requirements. And actually one of the 5 parts of your municipal drinking water license is your financial plan, your long-term financial plan, which you have to demonstrate sustainability of your water system. And with infrastructure planning, you're ensuring ongoing sustainability of your infrastructure with a 10-year plan. And you coordinate this 10-year plan with other divisions. So it's not just a water-specific infrastructure plan. And you may have different priorities established by water main age or the failures that you're seeing. So changing risks in your distribution system. Maybe you have some condition assessments and large capital maintenance and replacement projects along the way that help improve the system. And so you have improving conditions in infrastructure planning. Priority projects are confirmed on a color-coded map, and you have annual infrastructure meetings to discuss priorities and changing risks year to year. And you also have some emergency repairs that take place by contractors. As one of the key roles of the operating authority is to ensure that we're meeting all safe drinking water quality standards. And so to ensure that, we have regular sampling and monitoring for those parameters that are regulatory. There's regulatory sampling throughout the distribution system. And you also have operational chlorine residual program, so ensuring that you do meet that disinfectant residual in the furthest reaches of your system. And where you may have some adverse conditions, you have incident response and notifications with immediate adverse water quality incident reporting to the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, to York Region Public Health, to yourselves when it's health related, and to the public as well if there were any precautionary water advisories or boil water advisories or do not drink water advisories. And then summarizing your monitoring and reporting, you have annual reports and communications of those annual statistics on through your website and through these meetings as well through council. The ministry carries out an annual inspection of all water systems in the province, and ranges of scores have been 98 to 100%. And then some other recommendations are included as part of inspection reports, such as, actually this is seen in a lot of water utilities inspection reports, a recommendation to consider a backflow prevention program, and to note what actions are taken in response. And so whenever a ministry inspector makes recommendations, usually that gets tracked and measured through continual improvement processes of the Drinking Water Quality Management Standard. The licensing program I've pointed out a few times. So these are the 5 parts of your municipal drinking water license. So you have the overarching license, which expires in June 2021. There is an application deadline of 6 months prior to the expiry to allow the ministry and yourselves to negotiate updated terms and conditions. And so the next time you have to apply is by December 2020, at which time you should have an updated financial plan as well, which is at the bottom. Part of the license is the Drinking Water Works permit, which has a similar expiry date, similar application timeline. It's updated at the same time. If permits to take water were applicable to your drinking water system, that would be one of the 5 parts, but it does not apply here as your distribution-only system. The operational plan is updated annually, and what the operational plan describes is how you meet the drinking water quality management standard requirements here. So the province has put out a mandate and a requirement for operating authorities to conform to the drinking water quality management standard, and you become accredited to that. Well, the operational plan describes how you meet the 21 elements of the drinking water quality management standard. The DWQMS for short is very much like ISO 14001 or 9001, and it has taken some elements of HACCP, which is the food sector industry standard as well. And then another of the 5 parts is that you're maintaining your accreditation to this standard. So like ISO, you have registrar audits by third parties coming in and verifying that you're carrying out your activities as intended. There is a third party also coming on, additional to your Ministry of Environment and Conservation and Parks inspector. There's a third party who does a third party check that you're meeting the intended outcomes of your drinking water quality management system. And so you have internal audits that are a requirement of the DWQMS, and then you also have annual external audits. And you have DWQMS 2.0. So the reference to 2.0 here is the ministry has updated some standard requirements within it, and so now a lot of water utilities are becoming accredited to this updated standard, which is referred to as 2.0. The 5th part of your license is the financial plan. So it was last approved in 2015, and it will need to be approved prior to the application deadline of your updated license. So you will see through this group an updated financial plan for you to approve, which is it needs to be good for a minimum of 6 years to go beyond the license timeframe. So the license gets renewed every 5 years, and the financial plan needs to be good for 6 years. Annually, in your quality management system, you have a number of activities that take place so that you are more resilient, you're operating optimally, and some of these activities are listed here. You have annual emergency response training. So last year, you tested a Backflow event to see how well operational procedures and emergency response procedures are set up to support the team in responding to such an event. And hopefully you don't experience that. And then in 2017, you tested freezing rain and how that might impact your normal operating conditions with staff and your fleet and having to respond to various situations related to freezing rain. And so those are examples of, mock scenarios or drills that you carry out through your water utility. And then in 19, you'd have another emergency response training and testing activity. Similar to how you carry out annual testing corporately with your corporate community emergency management coordinator, and you have through the municipal the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act have their annual requirement to test the corporate emergency plan. We have the requirement to regularly train and test on the drinking water system types of emergencies. Annually as well, through the quality management system, you have internal audits, usually in the fall timeline, and it was last conducted in September, and usually you try to stick to the same time frame every year. An internal audit has to be conducted once per calendar year. And external audits is normally spring time frame. Next one is scheduled June 10th, and that's an annual activity by an accreditation body. And then your inspections can be unannounced, focused audits or inspections, and it was last conducted last November. And usually those are similar timeframes, but they can change and vary because when they're unannounced, they usually aren't predictable. Also, annually, you have annual reports, which are completed by the end of February every year and posted annually. And you're advised when the report has been posted. You also have annual requirements for management reviews, in which March 27th was the last management review, and these have to be carried out once per calendar year, and it's by your top members of top management and the people who oversee your quality management system for the drinking water system. And you have a summary report of your management reviews posted in the spring timeline, summarizing the deficiencies of your system, the decisions and action items from those management reviews. And then you also receive reports on an annual basis from the water system staff about annual budget. So we're looking at infrastructure review, asset management, and outcomes of risk assessment. And the outcomes of risk assessment is just to identify those changing risks and perhaps some new priorities for the drinking water system. Ontario Reg 170, Section 11, which falls under the Safe Drinking Water Act, requires annual reports. And in the annual reports, we have to describe the drinking water system, we have to describe the list of chemicals used, the summary of the most recent water test results, any adverse test results that occurred, and then what, if you did have adverse conditions, what corrective actions were taken as a result. Description of major expenses incurred related to installation, repair, maintenance, and replacement of equipment, and the locations where the report is available, which often is a website and perhaps maybe a main operations site in Aurora. And also annually, you have a review of your risk assessment. This has to be annually updated. And your highest risks for the Aurora drinking water system are related to the occurrence of water main breaks. Part of the risk evaluation looks at the likelihood of a failing event or failure and the consequence of it. So the balance of the two will come up with a listing of your highest risks. And so water main breaks, most drinking water systems in Ontario, or anywhere actually, any distribution system is vulnerable to backflow events. So it's, even though you try to mitigate and minimize the potential for backflow events by optimizing your operations, there is still a high risk of backflow events. And then you have also identified in your risk assessment microbiological contamination as a possibility and a risk to consider. Now, we talk about highest risks, we look at the plans to address them. And so related to the occurrence of water main breaks, well, you have emergency water main break response and disinfection procedures. Related to backflow events, well, you have a backflow prevention program and a bylaw. And with the possibility for microbiological contamination, you have 40 plus town-owned sample points to take samples from. And sample points are important because if you're using a public site or a site that's not your own, it could be easily contaminated at the tap and providing some false information. And so the fact that you have over 40 town-owned sample points in the system, then that's a good representative, accurate sample. And with certified people taking your samples, it's a protected process. We also have emergency management, where we start with a minor emergency or maybe an alert, where you could be looking at severe weather conditions that may impact normal operations. And so when you have that situation, you may engage all of your staff to prepare. What do we need to do to prepare for this event? And you may also have your own operations services emergency plan activated and only involving the staff local to that division, the water services group. And so you have your operations services staff engaged, your activation of your emergency plan is activated, but the town emergency plan is not. So it's just specific to the operations group. You may have then a more severe emergency, a more significant emergency, where you could have a water advisory. And especially if it's town-wide, that is very impactful to normal operations. And so you would possibly have your municipal emergency control group activated, your operations staff fully engaged in the response activities related to this. So your normal operations are paused or suspended during this event. And then you have both operation services and the town's emergency plan activated, especially for a larger scale advisory type of scenario. And then if you were to have a major emergency, such as a natural disaster, your municipal emergency control group is activated, and so is your town emergency plan activated, and the operations services also is activated in this case. And so you're all hands on deck, all staff assisting with a large scale scenario like that. We have customer service. We have the water department staff responding to customer calls during normal hours, 8:30 to 4:30, but also you have an after hours answering on-call service who can dispatch staff if needed. Operations services do have 24/7 staff coverage, and actually one of the elements of the Drinking Water Quality Management Standard is that we ensure a 24/7 staff coverage and have an on-call program and backfilling of situations. You normally have same-day call response with most issues resolved over the phone. You have water efficiency measures being implemented for peak season demand. So midsummer, July months are high water intensive months. And so you do have a water efficiency bylaw related to that. You respond to customer complaints related to water quality, which are often related to discolored water, or reduced pressure issues, which are often isolated to the home or the building's appurtenances and plumbing systems. We do have 60,000 customers keeping an eye on the system, and you do have outreach and education events to help promote the safety of the local drinking water system. There is a listing of key challenges. Every distribution system has a vulnerability to backflow events. Even with a bylaw, you have all the mechanisms in place to make sure that we have backflow devices installed, that they are tested, that you have resurveying of facilities to ensure that all of the connections that require a backflow prevention device is present and is there, but the devices are mechanical and they can fail. And so there is still a vulnerability, and we should recognize that there is a vulnerability to backflow events. And we just have to have response plans in place and, as much as possible, prevent issues from happening. But where you can't prevent, you mitigate or else you respond. And then we maintain water quality in new developments as well. We have some low flow conditions that you're paying attention to and ensuring that the water quality is maintained in those situations. You ensure infrastructure sustainability and asset management for a distribution system. And you may have changing or increasing customer expectations, which are challenges, and then also changing regulations. Health Canada, for example, has reduced the recommendation for lead from 10 micrograms per liter to 5. And so often what Health Canada recommends for drinking water then translate to regulations. But that process has not been finalized for our province and for drinking water regulations, but it is anticipated. So we see the change at Health Canada. We anticipate there is a possible change to the lead limit for drinking water systems in Ontario. And so for your owner oversight role, you have financial plans to approve and to receive. And this, again, is one of the 5 parts of your municipal drinking water license. You do have an annual budget process to ensure that your water system remains sustainable. You do have 10-year capital planning for infrastructure planning, and so these are brought forth to you for approval. You may be taking in a leadership role in emergency management depending on the scale of emergencies you may see, And you are all faces for customer service, so you may receive resident calls or community concerns regarding the water, and so you would be receiving some of that information, a request for information, and having to interact with the operations group for those reasons as well, or pointing directly to them. And for more information, you can go to aurora.ca/water, and through you, Mr. Mayor, we can field some questions.
Thank you. Council, any questions? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Ms. Ross, for being here. For myself, I've been fortunate enough to be on council. This is my third term. So I saw a variation of this presentation back in 2015 and in my first term back in, I think it was 2012. And looking back at those presentations, I see a lot of similarities. To the best of your knowledge, since I would have last seen it in 2015, have there been any notable changes to the Safe Water Drinking Act or to our responsibility as owners of the system?
Not that I've seen or noted. 2012 was, the end of 2012 was when Section 19 of the Safe Drinking Water Act came into force. But before that, they had in existence Sections 11 to 18 of the Act that existed since 2002, which describes the owner and operating authority roles and responsibilities. So the Statutory Standard of Care with the penalties and all that's come into force in 2012, which would have been
our first
before the
presentation. I
time
think that's why it was brought forward
That's
to us
right.
at that time, and those who were on council at that time would have sat through it. And I just want to make sure that there isn't any notable changes since the last time I've seen it with regards to the regulations and so forth. So
That
thank
is
you.
correct. So there are no changes, but what can change are the membership to council.
Yep.
And there is a duty under Element 9 of the Drinking Water Quality Management Standard to ensure that the water utility communicates roles, responsibilities, and authorities to all staff, including the owner. And so there is a responsibility to do this probably with each new council. Unless you had exactly the same council, then perhaps you don't have to that time. But
Oh, no, I agree. It's always good to have a refresher.
it
So
is.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and though Section 19 of the Act also hasn't been tested in Ontario, fortunately, and so otherwise you would hear examples of that in these presentations, but it fortunately hasn't had to be tested.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Gilliland.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you so much for this presentation. This will be my first time going through this presentation. I happen to have the pleasure of going to the Lake Simcoe Conservation Authority presentation last week that covered some of this as well, which was good, but this was a little bit different. So thank you for that. Just for my clarity to understand, on your emergency management chart that you have on page 23 of 62, I'm trying to understand the difference between the significant emergency plan and the major emergency plan.
Okay.
It seems that the only difference is in the middle with the operations services staff fully engaged in response activities. I'm just a little confused. It's like more people are involved in the significant versus the major, and I just wanted to understand and clarity on what that actually meant and what the differences were between one and the other.
That is an excellent question. I wonder if colleagues to my right can, it's the emergency management slide. Perhaps the major difference between the red and the orange is that operations staff are leading that event response, perhaps, and then the major emergency is the corporation-wide staff, perhaps, but it doesn't explicitly say that.
Yeah, it doesn't really say, so I'm trying to understand what it means. So when we are in that situation, it's clear and we all understand what the steps would be in that situation.
Right. And it does, spotting the differences, the only main difference is that operations staff are fully engaged in response activities. which I'm not sure that they wouldn't be if their operations services emergency plan is activated also in the major emergency. That's a great question. I believe we'll have to follow up on that to clarify.
Okay. Perfect. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gilliland. Councillor Gallo.
Thank you. Just the one question on page 13, the effective treatment. We have an 80-20 split, and I'm just wondering who makes that decision. I've had some time on council, and that has varied where I believe the well water portion keeps going down and the York Peel Toronto portion keeps going up.
Did you?
Lindsay?
The region, they control that. They make that decision whether to, we have 6 wells in Aurora, and they're not always operating, pumping out water all the time, probably more so in the summer when the demand is higher. And then that 80-20 split is an estimate. And the region look at Aurora and Newmarket almost as one together. They don't really see it as different. So that split of 80-20 to them is more Aurora and Newmarket and a little bit of East Gwillimbury combined. Because, for instance, an example would be we have a well, number 5 at Old Young and St. John's Side Road. A lot of that water is going to pump out of that well and go right up into Newmarket when they're pumping water up in Newmarket. So they can only estimate, and their estimate is really for both Aurora and Newmarket combined. So we don't really know, and and you look at different parts of Aurora, it's going to be different. If you live down south of Henderson in the bottom end, you're getting very little well water. So you could be getting 95% Lake Ontario water. And so that's just an average for the whole, really for Aurora and Newmarket kind of together. We don't really know exactly what it is.
But through you, Mr. Mayor, is there some rationale why we're not pulling more well water or using less surface water, and why we wouldn't even have a say in that? Let's say we decided to do something different and we want more of our well water in our water supply and less from Peel, and who knows what that costs even to bring it into our area when we have our...
I believe part of the agreement when they got the Peel feed was they would use a certain amount to make it worthwhile building that pipe up here. They had to commit to taking a certain amount. I'm not sure what those numbers are, but that was part of it. They had to agree to.
So I guess to you, Mr. Mayor, do we have any say? Do we have any control whatsoever on that ratio? Can we influence the region on the water that we want, where the source of the water that we want to have, or is it just simply in their arms and we just do whatever they say? You may not have an answer for that, and that's
I
fine.
could always bring it up, right? But I mean, whether we actually achieve being able to make that change or having that say, I mean, from everything I'm listening to here, it's just as everything else is. We tend to have the most responsibility, but have no authority to make changes. That's the way it seems right across the board. So I'll bring it up and I'll get an answer for you.
At a minimum, I'd like to know the rationale, like why maybe we don't have enough water. I mean, there must be a reason other than, we had to pay for the thing coming from Peel. And if that's what it is, that's what it is. Kind of sad, but that's what it is. But at least have a rationale for it. If we can't make any decisions, then at least let's understand why.
Oh, Lindsay, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, what you're saying is true. Like when we used to have water restrictions and water shortages and outright, I remember the last time we actually had no water was probably back in about 2006, where the Orchard Heights Tower went so low that it shut off. There's alarms go off. It keeps a certain amount for fire protection, and we had no water. And those events happened before we had that peel feed. Before we had the peel feed, we couldn't keep the towers filled fast enough. Pumping the water up from the wells at the ACC wouldn't fill them quick enough. Then when we got that peel feed, it was a much bigger pipe, and we were able to supply that reservoir up there. There's a reservoir and a tower up there much quicker. And since that, we've had that peel feed 10 or 12 years ago. We haven't had any water bans or water shortages.
Councillor Gallo?
Just to follow up, and I don't remember exactly, but at least my term on councils, I've never seen 25, maybe 30% at the most from even prior to the peel that we've gotten from our local sources. So I'm just interested in seeing why it's not more, why it's not 50, or there must be a rationale for it. I just don't know.
Councillor Gardner?
Thank you. I'd say you made that interesting. I really want to know from Mr. Hayworth and Mr. Downey and maybe Mr. CAO. So are we in compliance with everything? Do we have the correctly accredited staff? Do we have enough staff?
I'm seeing nods, yes.
And actually, I've heard your name, Lindsay Hayworth, for years and years and years in Aurora. You've been taking care of us for a long time. Thank you very much. Yeah.
We can tell you're not used to hitting the button.
It's a bit daunting, I know. Thank you. So I have a question. The province is going to be downloading the responsibility for drinking water to municipalities next year. So is this then going to be a very different presentation?
I'm sorry, I don't know the reference.
No.
Okay, if
I believe you're, through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe you're referring to wellhead protection, are you not?
Source water protection.
Source water protection.
Yeah. That my understanding right now is with the Conservation Authority, and they were thinking of moving that to the municipalities.
Yes.
It hasn't happened to my knowledge at this point, but that's and the reason I'm familiar with it is when we moved forward with the fire hall. It was within that area, and we had to get an approval from the Conservation Authority with regards to any activities that were going to happen on that site. It wasn't going to impact the wellhead.
Thank you. At the last meeting of the Conservation Authority Board, it was said that there was, with certainty, nothing's 100%, but that it is going to be downloaded to the town. So maybe this isn't the right time, but we should know what extra responsibilities we're going to have to take on, and we're also going to know what that is going to cost us, so we can put that money into our budget. So who do I leave that with?
Mr. Downey?
Through Mr. Mayor, you can leave it with me. Certainly, if there is a downloaded responsibility and it will have an impact on the budget or number of staff, then it would come to you through a report from me. But at this point, no one has indicated that it is our responsibility, so I haven't reacted to it.
Councillor Carter?
Keep your ears open, Mr. Downey. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Any other questions? Councillor Gallo?
Not a question, but I don't know about anyone else, but I'd like a tour of at least our facilities or maybe a York Region facility. I'd be really interested in in having that tour.
Let's see if we can maybe set something up. Lindsay? Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Gallo. I just have one question. Oh, Al?
I'm sorry.
Sorry, Mr. Downey?
Just so we don't lose that point, if there is interest, if we could go through the clerk and, or you can contact Lindsay. It's just that we're trying to, we would like to be able to coordinate a time, and the easiest way of doing that is through a central body. So the region would then have to make an appointment with them to go in. So we want to make sure that we're going to give them a definitive date.
Councilor Gallo?
Just a suggestion, Betty is really good at organizing us. Maybe she could send something else.
I'll get Betty on it. Don't worry. No, you know what? I'm okay with my question. That's fine. Well, I was just going to ask it. You know, how much of a strain does development have? Like, what kind of impact does development have on our current system, and specifically like overdevelopment? Maybe it's more for Lindsay. The more, if we overdevelop in our area, would that have a strain on the system?
No, it's a common misconception, I guess I would say, that people pressure loss. There's a lot of people who experience pressure loss in their homes, and there's a common misconception that that's due to the growth and overdevelopment of Aurora, but that's not the case. You know, we build new infrastructure to accommodate the new building, and there's no shortage of water coming up the pipe. The strain is more on the other end, on the sanitary end, the water going out.
So there are some kind of infrastructure strains, but not necessarily pressure-wise.
No, not pressure, no.
Thank you. Thank you, Bridget.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Council, do we need a motion to receive this? No? No, Mr. Clark? So we're just going to adjourn? That's it? All right, motion to adjourn. Councilor Thompson? Councilor Gilliland? All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. We are adjourned.